We are now joined by international analyst Arnold August to talk more on the ongoing election day in Uruguay. Welcome, Arnold, to From the South.
It's a pleasure for me to be with you once again.
It's our pleasure to have you. Arnold, Uruguay is going to the polls. They are deciding between the current ruling government coalition or if the broad front of the leftist side will return to power. What's at stake in this election?
Well, firstly, the elections, I think it's important for the listeners to take into account that one aspect is different from what we are used to, for example, United States, Canada, and other Western countries, and the voting in Uruguay is obligatory. People have to vote. On the other hand, another important aspect of the voting that is taking place today is on a referendum to important articles to reform the Constitution. Those, on the other hand, this vote is not obligatory. So people, they vote only, for example, for the presidency and the legislature, but not vote on the Constitution. So, this is an important elections, and there's a lot of controversy, of course, with regards to the who is going to win. People are anxious from, many parts of the world, including in the West and Latin America, that finally the Frente Amplia, or the United Front of Pepe, that it will come into power once again, and people are hopeful for that. So that is an important thing to take into account. But I think what is also making the headlines, and rightly so, is not so much the elections for the president as such, but also the reform of the Constitution for the new pension plan. Now, what happened there is very interesting, and the outcome could be very significant for that country and even rebound into other countries in Latin America. The trade unions in Uruguay made a proposal to overturn the conservative government's plan for the pension plan, and they are now proposing as a referendum, as an amendment to the Constitution, that the retirement age be brought down once again from 65 to 60. And secondly, very important, the actual amount that is given to the pensioners will be tied to the minimum wage. And thirdly, very important, they are going to outlaw the role of private venture funds, I guess, in this pension, which is very important. However, the controversy is this, in Uruguay, the whole status quo, the whole establishment opposes that, including the Frente Amplio, including the left-wing United Front. The only ones who seem to be in favor of it is the union and the population in the base. That is why some experts are saying this is serious. If it goes through, it will mean a debt of $1.5 billion for Uruguay, which, according to financial experts, would be a very, very heavy burden and an almost impossible task to confront. Thus, people are talking about, if people vote yes, it would be Uruguay's Brexit moment, in the sense that Uruguay will be breaking with the surrounding financial institutions, because they will not be able to pay that 6.5 billion debt to assure the new pension plan.
They're also reforming, they're also on the reform. As you were saying, they were voting on two other reforms. They are talking about the night rates that is being promoted by the ruling government. How can this other reform, as you were explaining the first one, how can the second impact the results of the elections?
Well, I think perhaps it's less controversial. I think that perhaps there's more of a consensus on that. This came about, the nighttime raids came about, imposed by the previous government, I believe, as a result of the growing cocaine trade in Uruguay, fostered by neighboring countries. And as a result of this, as happens in every country in Latin America, when you say drugs, you have violence, you have mob rule, and a lot of such civil disobedience and violence. And that is why it is now being proposed that the that the night raids are able to take place in order to try to stem the recurring violence that is taking a place as a result of the gang violence and drug cartel activity.
As you were saying at the very beginning, voting is different in Uruguay. Voting in the country is mandatory, but there is also no consular voting. People cannot vote from abroad. They have to travel to Uruguay, although in this case it's not mandatory. How can that vote from abroad impact the voting inside the country in terms of results?
Well, quite frankly, I'm not too familiar with the diaspora of Uruguay outside of the country, so I really cannot tell you how that will affect the vote. But normally, from previous experience, cannot make a blanket statement, but normally people outside a country such as Uruguay, if they are exiled as a result of right-wing policies, they would be voting in favor of a left-wing government, the United Front, and perhaps take a position with the trade union's position on the reform of the pension plan. But I think it's very difficult to say how that will affect the overall election results for the presidency.
Arnold, it's very early still to be talking about results. Most polls are expecting a second round later in November between the top two contenders in this first round of voting. But whoever wins at the end the presidential office, what is the main problems that they will have to tackle once they are in office for Uruguay?
As you say, yes, we'll be watching the election this evening, and almost certainly 99% for sure, no single candidate will have more than 50%. And thus there will be a runoff vote, a runoff election on November 24th, just next month. And well, the question is very good. If the vote goes through to amend the Constitution to have that new pension plan with the cost of $1.5 billion, whoever wins it, they're going to have a big problem on their hands to try to deal with this problem. And this, if it passes, irrespective if the referendum passes, irrespective of who is at the head of the government trying to administer this new law, which is so expensive, irrespective of who it is, they're going to have a big job on their hand in order to try to, apply the will of the people to change the referendum, change the pension plan, so the situation is far better for the pensioners. But that will be their main problem. However, if the pension plan does not work, if the majority do not approve the change in the pension plan, their job will be far easier. They will be able to deal with many problems facing the society, such as inflation, etc.
Thank you, Arnold, as always, for your inputs hearing from the South.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
It was our pleasure as always. That was Arnold August, internationalist, speaking to us hearing from the South on the current general elections in Uruguay.